This conference will now be recorded.
Okay. Let me grab this. So can everyone see the PowerPoint presentation?
Yep.
Okay, this is my first time using this system, so it's a little new to me. But first of all, I'm going to go over the submittal process in CAERS. So the 2020 oil and gas emissions inventory is going to be submitted through our CAERS system. If you are just getting started and you don't have an account, when you log in at CAERS or when you go to caers.utah.gov, you're going to see this landing page. You'll just create an account button right here. If you do have an account, obviously you just sign in with your username and password. If it's your first time logging in and we don't have an account set up for you, you're going to go to this page. And what you'll need to do here is you'll just follow the instructions. If you never reported data before, you'll download the CAERS registration form. And you can either mail it to the address that's provided there or email it to ogregistration@utah.gov. And then if anyone has any questions, just go ahead and ask them as I go. So basically, once you have an account and you're logged in, you're going to see this page. The first thing you're kind of going to want to do is download your emissions inventory templates right here. So you'll click that. It's going to download an Excel workbook, and then you're going to fill out the Excel workbook. I'm going to go over that a little more in detail later. I'm just going to go through the CAERS submittal process right now. So once the workbook has been downloaded and completed, you'll save it as EI workbook _2020 _ and then your company name. And then to submit it, you'll click down here at the emissions inventory workbook. And then you'll select your workbook and then click on upload EI workbook. And then also you're going to want to click on reporting year 2020. So the emissions that you're going to be reporting are for the calendar year 2020. And then once your workbook's been submitted, you'll get to this verification page. It's going to just give you a submission ID. And then also, if you have supporting documentation that needs to be uploaded, you'll do it on this same page or company page. To submit it, you'll just click on the documentation, select your documents, and click upload documentation. And then once you've done all this, at the bottom of your company profile, you can see in the documents section your workbook there and also any documentation that you've submitted. And just a note on the documentation, all documentation has to be submitted in PDF formats. So does anyone have any questions about the submittal process in CAERS? If not, I'll go ahead and go into the workbook. So once you download the workbook in CAERS, this is what you're going to see. The first tab is the operator info. So you'll just obviously fill in your operator name, address, contact information, and any alternate contact that you have there. And just a couple things in the workbook. So anything in green is something that you're going to submit yourself. Anything in blue is going to be a drop-down option. And anything in gray are fields that you don't need to fill out. There are a couple exceptions for this though, and we'll go over them as we go along. So the first tab you're going to fill out is your facilities list. You'll just spell out your facility name here. And the facility name is going to be a drop-down selection on each of the corresponding tabs. And then you'll select the facility type, annual oil production, your condensate, gas, water. And let's see. So, and let me know if this isn't big enough. I can enlarge it a little bit there. Okay, so you just fill out your information, put any approval order, travel minus source registration, latitude and longitude, and then the production area designation. This is a important section here. You'll either choose defaults if you're just going to use the defaults, or you can choose any production area designation. This is the fourth tab. We'll go over that in a little bit. It's a little bit out of order, but most people just use the defaults. But this is going to carry over to several different tabs as well. And then most of these other questions are pretty self-explained. So. And then, yeah, I'll kind of just skip over the ones that are kind of easy to figure out, like annual oil production in the future, and kind of go over the ones that are a little more complicated. So the associated APIs tab, again, you'll select from the drop down your facility, and then you'll fill out any APIs that are associated with that facility. I believe we have up to 100 that you can put in. Please contact me if you have any over 100, or you have, I believe we can hold up to 2,000 facilities. I guess 2004. So if the workbook isn't big enough for you, please contact me directly and we can work that out. So the production area designation analysis tab. This is going to be, all this in gray is the default information. This has been derived from previous submissions. So you're welcome to use the defaults, or if you're going to create your own production area designation, you'll come down here. This is your number 1. So you can fill out this information, and then you'll also need to fill out the average component counts for that production area designation 1 right here. If you don't have component counts and you want to create a production area designation, you can also use these default component counts and put those in. And again, on your facilities list, your production area designation is right here. So if you're going to use the default, you'll use that. If you put other ones in, you'll select that for each facility.
Right. And then, sorry, one question. Is there the ability to add more designation areas if for some reason you have more than 9 or 10? Or would you prefer it to be narrowed down to just how many?
So we have 10 places. If you needed more, you can contact
one other clarification. So yeah, like Ryan said, you can contact him if you need more. One other thing, just to be real clear on if you do your own custom designation, there absolutely has to be a corresponding set of component counts. So it's like Ryan said, if you don't have component counts for that area, you just want to copy and paste the default in. But if you had like a 1 and then production area 2, you just have to keep copy and pasting those, because if you leave them blank, then it'll throw errors in the work later on in the workbook. It'll start kicking errors out. So those absolutely need to be filled out, even if you're just copying and pasting default data into it.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. And then in terms of if you add in your own designation with your gas analysis data, the support documentation, is that part of it where you would put in the gas analysis report as documentation for that production area?
Yeah, so in the CAERS system, you'd load that as your supporting documentation.
Okay, all right, great, thank you.
Yep. And then, yeah, at the end of each tab too, I'll just give an opportunity to ask questions. If there's no questions, we'll just move on from there. So does anyone else have questions about the production area designation and analysis tab? Okay, so the next section is the drill, completion, recompletion, and workover tab. Again, you'll just select your facility name from the dropdown. You'll select any affected API. And on these two, if you have wanted to report on several APIs, you could select, your first facility again and then put in a second API. That's completely fine. And then you'll just select the well type, activity type, and then you'll fill these out as well. As far as your total gas and liquids flared or vented during completion. You'll select any controls, so controlled or uncontrolled, and then you'll select the control percentage or put in the control percentage. Gas flaring control, and then in the drill rig, completion, engine, workover engine control release points, you'll select either stack or fugitive, and then you'll fill out, the height, the diameter, exit temperature, and exit velocity. And then the same thing for gas flaring release points. And then all these in gray here at the end, like I said, you won't fill out anything on these. These are just the calculations from your inputs for each different pollutant type. And then one thing to note too, so you're going to have your emissions typically at the end of each tab. And then if you scroll down to the very bottom, you're going to have a total for each pollutant type too. So this okay, so I'll move on to the associated gas flaring. Again, just like all of them, you're going to select your facility type from the drop down. These two, if you have a lot of facilities, you can kind of copy and paste in as well. So that's fine as long as it matches a facility. Your affected API, well type, activity type. Okay, and then total production gas liquids flared or vented. So you just put those in for each, gas vented, diesel flared, pretty self-explanatory there. And then you'll select the control flare efficiency. And then again, your gas flaring release point, similar to the previous tab. And then everything again here in gray is just the calculations. You can see the formulas in here if needed. There are formulas. And again, you won't fill out these gray fields except for in the next tab. So is there any questions on the associated gas and flaring? Okay, so this is the RICE and turbines tab. This one is probably one of the more complicated tabs. So again, you're going to select your facility name, turbine, compressor, or engines. So you have a drop down to select which one. You'll fill out the make and model, total hours of operation, site rated horsepower. And then this is a drop down to select the engine category. So you'll have total fuel combusted that you'll need to fill out, fuel heating value you'll need to fill out, control, the release point again, similar to the other ones. And this is the one section where you can fill out these gray areas. So essentially, if you're going to use AP42, you'll select your engine category. It's going to automatically populate your factor in units. But if you're using manufacturer spec or stack test, you're going to select this. It's going to be, you'll leave the category blank, and then you'll actually have to put in your own emission factor and units right here. And you'll do that for each pollutants category as well. So these are all essentially the same right here, just different type of pollutants. And then an important thing to note is when you get to the end here. So for example, let's see here. So these are going to auto-populate, but if you choose manufacturer spec or your stack test and you put those in manually, you're actually going to put the pollutant in manually as well. So you see this one that let's see here. So this one I chose manufacturer spec right here, and then filled out the units, and then I manually put this in as well as a 50. So this is one of the trickier tabs. Does anyone have any questions on this?
Yeah, I have a question. And I think when I did this in 2017, or for the year 2017, one of the engines for my facility, they used propane, but we used, I think, AP42 factors. And I can't remember exactly what the workaround was then. So I guess my question is propane an option under the AP42 pull down, or is there a workaround?
Let's take a look at this. So natural gas, distilled oil, natural gas, diesel, gasoline, diesel. Yeah, so it looks like propane isn't an option. So you might need to contact me on that and do a workaround.
This is Greg. I think, Eric, what we had you do is I think we just had you fill in AP42, and then for the category, it still lets you overwrite the category with, you may have put propane in. And because those cells are unlocked, the gray ones, like Ryan said, I think we just had you write in the factor in there for the propane, I believe is what we had you do. I mean, we could pull up your old workbook and double check that. And with that said, just remember for everyone else that if you do overwrite things with your own factor, obviously it's going to overwrite the formula in those cells. And so if you decide later, oh wait, actually I do want to use AP42, you'll have to like copy that formula from one of the, the kind of default cells and paste it back in so that it'll populate your formula in there. And same with the emissions. If you overwrite any of those gray cells, you'll have to remember to go to kind of one of the blank cells you haven't touched and put the formula back in for it to calculate it for you if you want to do that. Otherwise, you can hand input it yourself, obviously. But I think that's, as far as Eric's question, I think that was the workaround. We just had you overwrite those cells and then put in the numbers yourself.
Okay, and then any other questions on the rice and turbines? Okay, so we'll move to the separators and heaters. Very similar, you're going to fill or select your facility name from the drop down, or you can copy the previous facilities in there. Heater type, so tank heater, heater treater, reboiler, line heater, or separator. Heat duty rating, total annual hours of operation, production area designation. So this is just going to default to whatever you chose in your facilities list. And just a quick note too, so on turbines or anything you're putting in manually. So if you selected like manufacturer spec, you want to submit supporting documentation for that. And then, yep, you'll just select the control status, release point again. So very similar to some of the other tabs. And that's about it for this one. So it's pretty simple. Is there any questions on the separators and heaters? Okay, so we'll move to the dehydrators. You're kind of going to see kind of a pattern here. You'll select the facility name, your gas processed, unit rating, total annual hours of operation, circulation rating, the control type, your release points, volume of gas for your combustor or combustor pilots. And then this one too, just a note on this, is that you do need to provide your own emission factor on this tab for the dehydrators. And again, you'll want to submit supporting. So any questions on the dehydrators?
Yeah, Ryan, I have one. So in the past, I've seen, so for 2017, dehighs and other units be reported but with 0 hours of operation. Does the agency require that we list out all units for the particular source types and then just designate whether or not they operated in the reporting year or not? Or should we only submit units that did operate in 2020?
You only need to submit units that operate in 2020. Is that correct, Greg?
Yes, I mean, it's up to you if you want to. Some operators have done that, just put every unit, just because it was easier for them, for their process is easier for them to just copy and paste everything than to go individually. But that's completely up to you. The only thing you're only required to put in the ones that did operate. That's the only requirement. If you want to put in the others because it's easier, that's fine. But otherwise, it's just the ones that operated.
Okay, all right, that's helpful. And then what about dehydrator and separator combination units? I guess if we would report, if just the dehy operated in that combination unit, we'd report it here. But if the separator was fired, we would put that operation and emissions on the separator and heater tab, correct?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay, and then any other questions on the dehydrators? Okay, so we'll go ahead and move to the tanks tab here. Again, you'll select the facility name, facility type, the number of tanks, the temperature, separator pressure for each one, each tank type. So for example, on this one, it's oil tanks. So the tank temperature would refer to the oil tank, separator pressure to the oil tank. And then when you see condensate tank, the next one, temperature, would refer to the condensate tank, and separator pressure for the condensate tank. And then again, you have your production area designation here. So your throughputs, either oil, condensate, or water. Controls again. Select from the drop down there. And then your release point, similar to a lot of the other tabs there, your volume of gas for combustor and combustor pilots. And then this one is somewhat tricky here. So basically, you want to fill out, so your standing, working, breathing emissions here, factors, and your flash emission factors here. So you'll fill out either these two, your standing, working, breathing emission factors and flash emission factors, or we also have a combined here. So combined standing, working, breathing / either these 3 cells or these 6 individually here, if that makes sense. But you won't fill out all of them. And then, so you'll just do your emissions calculation method, condensates, emission factor, and oil emission factor for each. And then again, you'd want to submit your supporting documentation for this, and then your, and then also you'll need to submit your emissions right here. So any questions on the tanks tab? Okay, so we'll move to the truck loading. And again, you'll just select the facility name, how many barrels per year, everything's been loaded. And then again, this is yearly, so everything you're gonna be putting in as a yearly number. So your vapor pressure, molecular weights, temp, and then the control type and percent controlled. So that one's pretty simple. Any questions on the truck loading?
Hey, Ryan, this is Greg. If we can just go back to tanks. So I don't know if we've got any really small operators here. So typically in tanks, you're going to need a software package to derive those emissions. In the past, EPA had a free one that some of our really small operators had kind of used because they didn't have the, they weren't paying for the larger or the other software packages. If you're in that circumstance, EPA's terminated that Tanks 409D program. So if you're in that circumstance, if you probably just reach out to Ryan, he can probably point you to some possible resources for that and workarounds as well. I believe Oklahoma may actually have kind of mirrored Tanks 409D and updated with the newer emission factors. But again, just get with Ryan if you are in that circumstance.
Okay, perfect. And then we'll move to the pneumatic controllers. Again, this one's pretty simple. You just select your facility name, device type, how many high bleed, intermittent bleed, low bleed, and then your average hours per device. So any questions on the pneumatic controllers? Okay, so we'll move to the pneumatic pumps. Again, you'll choose the facility name, pump type, the pump function type, total hours of operation, average vent rates, control, and then your release point information as well. So does anyone have any questions on the pneumatic pumps? So we'll move on to the fugitives. Again, this one's pretty simple. You'll just select your facility name, the product type, and then your total annual hours of operation. So any questions on the fugitives tab? Okay, so we'll move on to the produce water and injection. Again, you'll select the facility name, and then the question, do you operate a skim pond or vaults? Yes or no. And then you'll do your evaporation pond annual throughputs or your injection well annual throughputs. So that one's pretty straightforward as well. Any questions on the produced water and injection? Okay, so we'll move on to the centrifuges tab. Again, this one's pretty simple. So your facility name, annual throughputs, and control percentage. Any questions on this one? And then, so we'll move on to the solid waste disposal, pretty straightforward as well. So you'll select the facility name, your annual throughputs, and then whether it's a land farm or landfill. Any questions on the solid waste disposal? Okay, perfect. And then the last tab here, you're not going to do anything with this tab. It's just your summary from basically the sum of all the pollutants from all the tabs that you'd filled out there. So yeah, basically once you'd fill out your workbook, you'll just save it and then upload it into the CAERS system. Any other general questions from anybody?
Yeah, Ryan, I have a question. On the tanks tab, there is a note, believe at the very bottom, that mentions something about the produced water and injection information. So is it correct that if the company operates operates a tank that's in conjunction with a pond, that you wouldn't put that water on this tab, you would put that water on the produced water tab?
So you're saying, so what's the setup there?
So it's in reference to footnote A. So we interpreted this as if you are operating a skim pond, that water associated with that pond wouldn't get reported on the tanks tab. It would get reported on the produced water tab.
Yeah, I believe so. Do you have any comments on that, Greg?
Yeah, I mean, I guess so if that water came, if the water was on a production site, went into a tank, then it's going to get reported on this tab. And then if it subsequently goes over to, a truck comes up, picks it up, and then takes it to produced water site, then it'll get reported there as well, because that has a different emission factor for it. And that's how that works. As far as the skim pond goes, that's how that would work. So the drop down kind of guides on that. As far as that goes. So I'm gonna have to look at the footnote. It's hard to see again, but I believe that's what your question's asking.
Okay. Yeah, I guess kind of based on what you said, it seems like that water needs to be reported on both tabs.
Right. If again, so it depends on what type of facility. That's why it has a facility type on there. But if you're a produced water facility, you're going to report those in your produced water, unless you have some tank pretreatment or something that effect. But if if you're getting it into a vault or a skim pond, if the water truck's coming in and putting it in the vault and skim pond, you wouldn't be reporting here, because you're going to have the vault and skim pond and evap ponds are all in that produced water tab.
Got it. Okay.
So yeah, this is strictly for literally, I mean, it's going into a tank is what this tanks tab is for. So if you're doing produced water and you're not using tanks, it's completely in that produced water tab is where that's going to get calculated.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
And then we've also got, Ryan probably was going to get to this, but we've also got on the website, there's the instructions. There's like, a document with all the instructions that goes through each tab as well, that you guys are certainly welcome to use as a resource for this and that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, so I was going to go over that. So yeah, on the websites, it's just OGEI here. So your 2020 statewide oil and gas emissions inventory. These are the workbook instructions here. They're very detailed. So if you have any specific questions, you can always pull that up, or give me a call or send me an email. And then we also have the link to CAERS here as well, which if you have any questions on CAERS, there's also a user manual on the CAERS website, or you can contact me on that as well. Any other questions?